All right, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Bo Teak, reporting here from Oslo, Norway. We're in the studio once again today with Zak Bennett for part two of his interview, or our interview together, our conversation together about life as a journalist, what it's like to report abroad or live abroad as a reporter and live at home as a reporter. It's got a very interesting background here of being a reporter for over a decade now. I've been published in the Wall Street Journal, Vice, Huffington Post, as well as he's the regional chair of the National Press Photographers Association down there in the South, in South Florida. He's based in Miami, and we are going to discuss this time. Last time we had quite an interesting conversation, especially about just what it is like to be a reporter abroad, but also some specifics about how it was to be in the migrant caravan down there in Central America and Mexico, because you spent a couple weeks living on the migrant caravan, reporting on that. We're going to get into a bit more about citizen journalism today, the impact of that and the future of that, as well as reporting during the coronavirus and also reporting during the Trump administration, how things have changed since that all got started. All kind of potentially dangerous places to be out during the Trump administration, out during coronavirus. Anyways, I will let you be the judge for yourself as I bring you part two of our interview with Zak Bennett. I'm sure when you're down in these places, whether you're covering a disaster, you're covering the migrant caravan, I'm sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that probably a lot of people are, concerned for your safety, asking you about, oh, is it safe down there? Oh, be careful down there. So how do you, transitioning, like, how do you compare your feelings of safety in these kinds of situations to maybe how you feel in when you're reporting in the States, because you're reporting in the States a lot too. Do you
Yeah.
see any similarities or differences in this?
Um,
Or can you think of any particular situations where you felt you said you felt safe in the migrant caravan. There's also times you feel unsafe.
yeah, of course.
Hmm.
Driving, not being from a place and just, renting a car and hitting the road.
Yeah.
It can feel safe, but it's probably not the safest thing to do.
Hmm.
Not knowing the roads and not knowing where the next hotel is or gas station and
Hmm.
uh and I mean in southern Mexico there's a lot of problems and there is a lot of uh checkpoints on the roadways, maybe false checkpoints, but
Mm.
um, luckily I never had to deal with that much. I've been pretty lucky,
Maybe
but
maybe a better question would be, do you okay, so being a journalist in, say, like when you're abroad versus being a journalist when you're at home, like in your home country,
yeah,
um is the vibe different? Because in the United States nowadays there's a lot of negativity directed towards journalists, especially because of Trump
yeah,
and the fake news and the fake New York Times and all this kind of stuff.
yeah.
Um,
I,
so,
I,
how's the vibe? Because you said, okay, when you go to a lot of other countries, you feel pretty welcomed to talk to the other journalists, and you felt safe in the migrant caravan. And of course, these are all very variable situations, and there's definitely times where you feel unsafe too. But what about your experience as a journalist, maybe in the United States? How does that compare?
yeah. So, my experience, like being a journalist abroad, was always like before 3 years ago. Um, and I always found it like I find it easy to report and talk to people and
Mm,
get information from people in foreign countries. It's never been a problem. Like people are just very willing to talk to you. Maybe even they're like interested in talking to you. I've only been reporting in the United States for maybe 3 years. So, and that's been very much during this like anti-media fake news movement or push. Um, so, and yeah, in the United States, people don't want, like, a lot of the time don't want to talk to the media. They do all the time. They say, are you with the fake media? Or they just they don't, the career isn't really respected anymore. And it's funny because, these people are forgetting how, like, necessary the transparency and reporting is. But yeah, it is gotten, it seems like it's gotten really hard in the United States to be uh reporting, and there is always a pushback, and then you know the law. Yeah, it's very hard in the United
Yeah.
States
No, I can imagine because I mean,
compared.
I can think of just like, in general, I mean, I've noticed this, not as a reporter necessarily, but just as a human in general. You know, when you're abroad, when you're traveling abroad, and you're going places, usually, you walk in, hey, I'm from, a lot of places, you say, hey, I'm from here and I'm not from around here. And people are like willing to help you. And there's always just something about being abroad and you're a stranger. In a lot of ways, people are always much want to show you where they live or help you get directions somewhere or talk to you or like have a drink with you and stuff like this. And when I and it's funny because in my experience going back to the States, a lot of the time if you start talking about where you came from, it's like, oh, I came from abroad, I live abroad, now I'm here back in the United States. I have countless conversations with people where they get like kind of almost like naturally protective, naturally defensive, and where
Yeah,
you're just like, people say, oh yeah, so oh yeah, so what you been up to in Norway? And you'll be like, oh, I've been doing this and this. And you might get into some region where you start, saying, oh, well, we have this in Norway. It's like a little different than in United States. And people start to get defensive when you're not even trying to provoke anybody. And I can imagine, being a journalist, because a journalist, the way it seems to me nowadays, a journalist, even though you might be from the States, you're from like a foreign body. You are not, you are from the outside. You're not like a, it's almost like
yeah,
you're not a human. You're not one of us. You're like one of them.
yeah. It's interesting. It's almost like people think journalists have become spies on their life or something, or that we're out to get them. But it's such a strange idea because, um, and people are always questioning your reporting. And I haven't seen too many cases where, reporters at major publications are lying to the public. Um, and most journalists, have worked their whole life to do what they're doing, and the reason why they got into it in the first place was for, in hopes of like a more transparent future, or having more checks and balances. And I don't know anyone that got into journalism for the wrong reasons. So it's always like baffling to me when people are always questioning everything that's being said, um, because the whole point of being a journalist is just to get the information out. Like, the more information, the better. The more transparency, the better. Um, but yeah, people have been picking and choosing like the weirdest things to say is fake news. Like I remember when I was reporting on Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, like the island was totally destroyed. The president came in and said, there's been, I forget if it was 16 or like 35 deaths when he came, but we all knew it was hundreds of deaths. But for some reason, they're trying to keep this number down.
Hmm.
So his statements there alone saying, oh, Puerto Rico looks good. This isn't, he tried to compare it to Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And I even had family members calling me saying like, oh, it's not that bad there. I saw that, Sears is open and the Cheesecake Factory is open. And I'd say, well, I'm here
Capitalism
right
so
now.
great.
Um, and it's terrible. I said, everything's destroyed. A lot of people are dead. Um, at that point, it was countless people were dead, and we all knew it. I was talking to, people that were in FEMA, and they were telling me they knew it. But for some reason, the president wanted to downplay the the Hurricane Maria situation. And that was really deteriorating. That made people question the news, because, the president is our leading authority in the country, or kind of our spokesman. So if he says something, no matter how much reporting we do, uh, to tell the truth about a situation. We're not even trying to do anything else. We're just trying to tell you the facts. And that
Mm.
was how many people had died and how big the damages were. And after, the president gets his 2 cents in via Twitter, every reporting we do is totally degraded or devalued, and everyone's always going to question it whether it was fake news or not. And now we have tons of research from universities and all kinds of places that say thousands of people died in Hurricane Maria. So I don't understand what the lag in that situation was. But like I said, I had family members calling me and saying like, "Oh, I see this is open, that's open, everything's fine over there, right?" And I'm like, this is a huge island and a massive population, and just because the Cheesecake Factory in one little part of the island that didn't get hit so bad is open doesn't mean everything's okay. And only 30 people died in the hurricane. Um, so yeah, like that's the thing. The news can be devalued so quick, and if we have someone in a position of power like our president who's always downplaying everything, yeah, we can't get much done. And then you got a lot of people that don't trust you, even though you're on the ground, you're seeing it with your own eyes. um, so if you can't get people personally to 100% believe what you're seeing, how are you supposed to get a stranger that doesn't even like to read or doesn't like to pick up the paper or look for facts on their own? How are they supposed to believe it? It's much easier just to take a one liner on Twitter than to find your own information. It's like what I said, it's people just taking the easier route.
It is pretty
Putting a
bizarre. It's like, you know, pretty much the main motivation to start this podcast in the first place was because it is insanely frustrating to listen to a lot of like news and rumors and sensationalism about what life is like outside of the United States, what things like healthcare is like outside of the United States, what education systems. There's just so much stuff that people don't even know about. And like you said, they get these one liners and there's this sensational news. Oh, the people are just waiting in lines all over the UK and all over Germany to go to the doctor. It's like crazy communism over there or something like this.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the main reasons. And I mean, what do you think? What do you think the problem is? For me, I think that it really has something to do with an extreme lack of media literacy. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
and
generally in media, people are reading the headlines, looking at the main photo, and reading the caption.
yeah,
That's about it. Even someone that buys the paper is probably doing that for the most part. So yeah, I think there's options, in how you get your information. And if you have an easy option that is allegedly a reliable source, which let's say that's Trump making a tweet,
yeah,
then that's your easiest, most reliable option for getting your information. And he is our president, so you know if anyone questions what you're saying, you say, oh well, the president said it. Like, so why do I need to believe anything else? Like, I could
mm,
read a million articles and I'm still going to believe the one thing I read. So yeah, I think like what you said about media literacy, it comes from the fact that people kind of are in a rush, grinding in their day to day, and they want to find the easiest option to get their information, even if it they might not totally believe it, but at least they have a pretty serious source to back it up, to back up their belief,
mm.
so they can run with it. It gives them a quick answer for any situation, and they can get back to their normal life.
But okay, so like, what do you think about? Because I mean, there is a lot of what sounds like transparent people, journalists that are trying to be transparent, like you. It's like, I take a photo. This is what's happening. Here's the story. Here's the story about what is happening here. And I'm gonna. But what about? I mean, there are some news sources, quote unquote news sources, that seem to not be as transparent. Now I'm thinking about things like, Fox News, you've got,
Yeah.
then you've got MSNBC, and then you have, and then you have up and coming kind of news stations that are becoming more mainstream, like the One America Network, the
Yeah.
OAN. And I mean, the thing, these aren't just, little, YouTube channels with, these are
Yeah, they have huge
big deal.
followings. Yeah, and people that grew up, with the news, like baby boomer generation, they're not questioning the news. They're thinking, well, they are, but they're thinking these sources are just as legitimate as other sources. But they're very pointed, and they're backing I would say they're backing a specific agenda. I don't think they're just out there like to just telling whatever news falls on their desk, and seems important, and trying to get to the bottom of it, which is
Yeah.
what a traditional news organization does.
But I guess the thing is too is that it's pretty transparent. I mean, in a lot of ways, why they're doing this, because a lot of them are big corporations. They do have advertisers.
Yeah.
They have interests, and they are, coding a certain agenda. But
Yeah.
before we round it up here, I just wanted to get a little update with you about what life is like now as a journalist in the Corona times. So, how have you been reporting on this lately? Has it been?
Yeah. So it's been really hard. There's been news, but a lot less news. For Yeah, for example, a lot of people in my industry are on unemployment. Um, Probably more than half of the freelancers I know are collecting unemployment,
Wow.
and some of them also, are a little older, and they don't think it's a good idea to work, or they have pre-existing conditions, so they're not working. Because journalism is very much a career where you have to go out and get the news and talk to people. And but yeah, telling the news, it's just taking a lot of precautions while you're out there. Everything we're doing now with interviews, we're like keeping distance, wearing masks, and every single story is revolving around COVID. Yeah, it's really hard for everybody, and all the news desks are remote, so they can't communicate face to face in the office and make it all happen. But yeah, and a lot of the reporting is just cities opening, cities closing, numbers, people following COVID, people not following health precautions, people not following health precautions. So it's very like repetitive news lately. um
Yeah, I
yeah.
saw you. I saw you were hot on the beat, documenting some of the people returning to the beaches and stuff like that. Um, how is that reporting? I mean, do you meet any of the same kind of issues you've met with people who are, for example, opposed to journalists or?
For sure, yeah. People are real cautious to talk to journalists right now, especially if they're out in the public. Like I was getting interviews yesterday at the space launch in Cocoa Beach, and a lot of people don't really want to talk to you because they're at the beach enjoying themselves. They're socializing. They're not wearing face masks, and I think at the end of the day, people do feel a little insecure about that because they're not being a part of solving this problem necessarily, and they see me as someone that's going to highlight that. So yeah, I have been going to all the openings of cities and beaches reopening, and I remember I went to Jacksonville almost a month ago now. Jacksonville Beach reopened, and that's a city, just below Georgia on the coast. And they said, we can open our beaches, and we're going to make sure everyone's socially distanced, and um, keep it a safe place. And I understand that. But I took some photos of the beach that looked quite crowded, and it was really crowded. I mean, people were, just putting out beach blankets, hanging out. It was busier than a normal day on Jacksonville Beach. And uh, a week later, I heard my images were circulating a bit, and people were calling it fake news and saying that that photo was from a year ago, or the photo was from somewhere else. And It's funny because a lot of my friends and family, like people they knew, were telling them that, and they were saying, "Oh no, my friend actually took that photo, and he was there, and it was crowded." And it was just interesting that people don't want to believe things. They don't want to believe that the beach is crowded, during coronavirus, or they want to think that everyone's so responsible that they didn't all just like flock to the beach and not taking any precautions. But yeah, a lot of my images were called fake news, or they said the photo was from a year previous, and I was like, I was not in Jacksonville Beach in the past 10 years, so uh, it's impossible. And at the same time, I'm thinking, I'm a journalist. Why would I want to lie? What's my motive in putting up fake pictures, or putting up photos from my archive of a crowded beach? I don't have anything invested in in that that lie. So it was shocking to see my people saying my pictures were fake in different Facebook groups and platforms online.
Yeah, and this once again just goes also back to lack of media literacy, people not really having an understanding of how news is collected and processed, that the
Yeah, and there's like,
editors involved and
yeah, like my career is on the line when I take a photo, and if you lie in journalism even once, I think you're blacklisted. Like nobody wants to work with you ever again. That's
Mhm.
what I was taught in school. And also my editors' jobs are on the line. If they publish an image that's fake, all their jobs are on the line, and their I can't think of the word, their like legitimacy, or their trust, the trust people have in them is broken. So
Mhm.
they're trusting me, people are trusting them. So there's really no motive, or no situation where we'd want to post old photos or deceive the public, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, there has been some, famous cases of journalists being fired also for, I think, reporting on things that, they didn't, that their editors didn't want them to report on, or like rating things that they didn't want to report on. So I guess there's
Yeah.
like,
Well, those are generally, when things like that happen, like you said, it's a famous situation. Like if a reporter, makes up a story or says something that didn't happen, they're generally fired. It's public. There's tons of reporting about the situation. So it's, lying in journalism is like a last case, worst case scenario for every reporter I know, and I know a lot. So
mhm.
um, I would say, just like every other career or person, sometimes there's a, a bad person, but the way things have been the past 3 years,
Mhm.
people are questioning the media as a whole every single day. Every single journalist, they think we're all bad. It's definitely been blanketed. Um, and I actually don't know where that stems from lately, other than basically the U.S. government constantly saying, the fake news media, the fake New York
Yeah,
Times.
it's yeah.
It's totally shocking that that has happened. But
Mhm.
um,
Well, I think
yeah,
in some ways it seems to me that, because I've definitely heard, I mean, there is some, I mean, again, I think this is a whole other episode that we'll get into on another day. But just, to brush on the surface, there are some, you know, uh, people, for example, that you really don't see on the news that you would think should be commentators. For example, like somebody like Noam Chomsky, you just don't see him in the mainstream media. You know what I mean? You see him
yeah.
on other places, but you don't see him in the mainstream media. Person like a journalist like Chris Hedges, he used to
Oh,
work for
like,
the New York Times
yeah.
and got fired. I forget exactly why, but apparently unjustly, really. And kind of some people get blacklisted for that reason too, where they were a bit dissident towards like a lot of corporate
Yeah, if
narrative.
you're too much in one direction, nobody wants to talk to you. So
Yeah.
and the other thing is, with these commentators on mainstream media, like, they're dime a dozen. We don't know who these people are a lot of the time. They're
Yeah.
paid. They get paid a few $100 to come on the show for a little while.
Mhm.
And these are our sources, and so the way it's been the past like 5 to 10 years is they just have an endless buffet of commentators for CNN and Fox News and MSNBC
Oh,
and
it's
all these channels. And that we used to know who these people were, the commentators. Like when we were
yeah.
like, we used to be like, oh yeah, I know that guy, or yeah, he's like a well-known expert. But now it's just everybody's commentating, and I think people chase after that too. It's a career to be a commentator now.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I mean,
And
it's also the 24-hour news cycle and the fact that there's, you
yeah,
know
so they can't have the best sources on 24 hours a day, so they just bring in anybody. They're like, who's free? And I promise you, they have a giant database list of commentators they can call. And if
yeah,
one person isn't available, they just go down the list to see who else is next.
mhm.
And then those people are on debating in front of you all night long.
You see, traditional journalism as compared to citizen journalism, and
Yeah, the thing about citizen reporting is they're basically just collecting data and information, and you can do that with anybody with a phone. We can collect information and document things, and then hand it over to investigators, hand it over to reporters, and you never know. Like, but yeah, there's 100% need for that kind of citizen reporting, I guess you'd call it. But I think at the end of the day, it's just data collection, information
Mhm.
archiving is what the citizens can do. And then they can give it to, not give it, but they just post it. And then journalists, reporters, they can put these things together, do some investigating, talk to the right people, because journalists all, have contacts at the police station. They have contacts everywhere, up and down, you know, the system. So that's what needs to happen is these video recordings or any sort of data you collect needs to get into the right hands so it can be properly reported and investigated. So
Yeah, yeah, it's like, again, this idea of, like, the journalist kind of as a curator of information.
and that
Uh
might be, I mean, that's the direction we've been headed in for a long time. It's
Mhm.
just people generally reporting. If you look at the news, we're just reporting off of what he said, she said, and what we saw online or what video or audio recording we saw, and then the journalists kind of dive into that. So I think people are initiating the news.
Yeah, so, you know, um, I think there's probably a lot of people, listening out there right now that might be interested in getting into some kind of journalism, whether it be citizen journalism or maybe a more traditional route like you took. What do you think? Do you have any advice for people that might want to get into journalism, photojournalism, just reporting? Um,
Yeah,
because I mean, of course, there's the traditional route of like going to school, and education is very expensive nowadays, and yada yada yada. But it seems like nowadays there's a lot more access points into this whole
yeah,
bubble. So, do you got
yeah.
any like looking into the future? Any kind of recommendations for people who might want to get into something like what you're doing?
Well, yeah, I think what you know people like you are doing, like podcasts and citizen reporting. I think that is actually the what makes up the media now. But and like people like me are kind of like relics. We're just used to like fill the gaps or to put things together, or like you said, curate the news, not curate, but just organize it,
Mm,
so it's presentable and readable, and they can help. You know, you could throw any little piece of information on a desk, and someone can turn it into a story for you. Um, but yeah, if people want to get into it, I mean, the traditional route is has changed so much. It's like, yeah, I think, yeah, if you want to be a journalist, that's like your calling. You want to be a journalist, but I don't think you need to be a journalist. You just need to be like an aware, alert citizen, and be ready to take action or film something, and then hand it over to the right people and make sure it gets out there. You can start a movement, from home on social media. That's how most things are started or go viral these days. It's just from random people.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't think the idea would be to be a journalist unless that's what you want to do. And there's no there's no, I mean, back to like, the fake media, there's no real fame or glory or riches in being a journalist. Like the people that do it are people that, want to do it for the right reasons generally. So, um, yeah, I think the best idea is just to be, be an individual and take action when you feel like you need to. And I think collectively that kind of works.
That's right. Be aware, stay updated, and be ready to take action when necessary. I think that's a good way to round it up our conversation today. Thanks so
Yeah.
much, Zak Bennett, for coming on the show today. And
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, no, I think you definitely shared some really great perspectives from the field and perhaps dispelled some preconceived notions that some of us have had about journalism. So thanks for the info. And I hope we have you on the show again soon.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds great.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this interview with Zak Bennett, reporter, mixed media journalist. He's been reporting, like I said, for the Wall Street Journal, Voice, and the Huffington Post, many other publications, and you can find him at Zak_Bennett on Twitter, and I'll drop all that info down in the details. Like I said, everybody, on our previous episode, we are always here at Progressives Abroad doing our best to be the best allies we can be and the best in solidarity with a myriad of social justice issues around the world. You know this podcast, you know me, you know what we're here for. So please stay tuned to our page on Facebook or on Twitter, and anywhere you can find podcasts, to stay up to date with what we're doing. We're doing a lot of organizing, trying to raise money for different organizations, particularly right now, organizations associated with the Black Lives Matter movement. So stay up to date on there. We'll be having some events, some fundraisers, as well as promoting some of our artist friends and the work they're doing to also raise money and support and in solidarity. Thanks for tuning in once again. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel and our podcast on Apple and Google and all those great places. Really enjoy having you, and please send us your comments. I'd like to know what you have to think. I'd like to know if you would like to hear about some other issues on this podcast. We are growing and we are learning still how to run this thing. And I hope to hear from you, and we'll be back quite soon with some more interesting interviews and commentary. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm your host, Boutique. Progressives Abroad, over and out.